use propaganda on its own people. This provision is buried deep within the $642 billion defense bill and would give the government overarching power to push television, radio, print, and social media onto the U.S. public.
In one of the last acts as president, Barack Obama signed the Portman-Murphy counter-propaganda bill.
President Obama was able to make the deadline and recently signed the act into law.
What is truth? We are being inundated, Ed, with this idea that there's fake news and real news and propaganda.
They don't know that 2 nights before Christmas, Obama signed a section 2943 to the Defense Authorization Bill that created a truly the closest thing you'll ever get to a ministry of propaganda. Comcast, that also owns BuzzFeed, also owns MSNBC. So it's a bounce. MSNBC picks up the stories that BuzzFeed creates. CNN does the same thing. That's one side of it. On the other side now, we have the U.S. government who's determining what propaganda is and what it's not. Obama made this law while we were sleeping, now says the government can now participate in this thing called fake news. It's fake news because if they deem it to be propaganda, they simply say, we're going to unleash the hounds on this entity that creates something and says something we don't like.
What would be wrong with the State Department or the government basically providing what amounts to absolutely propaganda directed towards American citizens?
Extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely
dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous.
Dangerous to our democracy.
Dangerous.
extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Extremely
Dangerous to our democracy.
Extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Trump FCC has, in one very short period, moved to change 3 basic rules that have been in place to protect the diversity of voices and avoid monopolization of the broadcast television.
FBI have a personal vendetta
in pursuing the Russia investigation of
President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn.
This blurring of news and opinion is one criticism of the company. Sinclair's bid to buy Tribune Media and thus expand its reach dramatically in the local news market has drawn plenty of criticism.
Traditionally, to protect against any one company becoming too dominant, Congress has set certain caps on how many media outlets one corporation can own in a given market. But the FCC recently changed those rules.
Under the new leadership of Trump appointee Ajit Pai, the FCC has now made it easier to approve Sinclair's expansion.
We have a society in which the flow of information is crucial to a democracy. And when that free flow of information gets choked off.
Child actors weeping and crying on all the other networks 24/7 right now. Do not fall for it, Mr. President. These kids are being
I'm so sorry, we have to go.
They're given scripts to read by liberals.
What's the truth? We sat down with one woman who claims to be the leading trainer of child crisis actors, Avery Cole.
Every day is different, because every day a different horrifyingly devastating crisis occurs. So I want everybody to give me a nice big Children tug at the heartstrings. You know, we want to hit the headlines to force people to care.
We're part of some kind of deep state left-wing conspiracy. If the answer is yes, I do believe that, I have some bad news for you. You're crazy. You're a crazy person.
We're all being taken in by the dazzling theatrical performances of high school actors.
And I got up and I walked out into the middle of the cafeteria and I just looked down and I see people just laying there.
It could be your brother, it could be your best friend, it could even be your enemy.
As a conspiracy nut, mental health issues. That's not my nature. And these mass casualty shootings have a huge impact on our emotions, on our hearts, and how we think. And they're using, this gun mechanism as the driving force. I mean, no matter what state you're in, guns, it's all about guns, new legislation. See, and I think there has been so much misinformation given by the national news. Now, even the President of the United States, I mean, he publicly comes out and calls them out as fake news.
Tonight on social media, right-wing conspiracy theories going viral about David Hogg, a 17-year-old Parkland shooting survivor. The unsubstantiated claims say he's a crisis actor, a trained actor who takes advantage of tragedies for political gain.
Repealing the Second Amendment, preparatory to disarming the population, there are going to be calls for that. If the voters want it, their representatives will call for it. Is this the time, and shouldn't it make the rest of us a little nervous as America's getting crazier, obviously,
people, that's headed up to about 9 billion.
Yeah.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
FEMA is a front for a secret government, and the housing locations will actually serve as quarantine centers or internment camps. This is not an unfounded fear. After all, during World War II, the U.S. forced over 100,000 Japanese Americans into government camps for the duration of the conflict. And civil unrest could be considered a domestic emergency. How would this insurrection occur? Theorists cite any number of possible causes, from the establishment of a one-world government to a national pandemic. Some believe a global elite of bankers and aristocrats may artificially create a disaster to trigger a massive incarceration of U.S. citizens who object to the plan, whatever that plan might be. Fringe researcher Mary Louise alleges that FEMA keeps a red list and a blue list, where people on the blue list will be shipped to camps for quarantine or re-education, while those on the red list will be executed. Skeptics rightly point out that this conspiracy requires an amazing, even implausible level of organization. Also, a large natural disaster can displace hundreds of thousands of people, so building temporary housing in advance seems like a good idea. Yet there's another angle here. The US already holds the world's largest prison population, with over 2 million people incarcerated. Most of the people who believe that FEMA is a cover for a mass imprisonment, yet the facts are foreboding even to skeptics. The federal government has indeed constructed massive housing facilities across the United States, from Oakdale, California to Atlanta, Georgia. Executive orders have given FEMA and other agencies increasingly broad emergency powers, even allowing the U.S. Army and Marine Corps to perform domestic operations. Theorists like Dr. John Coleman allege the focus of FEMA has steadily moved away from natural disasters to concentrate on the management of a hypothetically unruly populace. In 2003, FEMA was incorporated into the Department of Homeland Security. To most Americans, this is just another game of bureaucratic musical chairs.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build. Ordinary men and women are too small-minded to govern their own affairs. That order and progress can only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign.
It is actually quite accurate. This is the most anti-gun president we've ever seen. Brainwash Americans against guns.
But that's not the president.
But it's at the president's direction. At every instance, the president uses every terrorist attack, virtually every criminal. Do you know what Barack Obama's position is? That there is no individual right to keep and bear arms whatsoever under the Constitution.
I'm at the neighborhood Walmart in San Jose, California. And this is what it has become.
If you need help, ask a Walmart manager first.
This video is giving us a glimpse inside a Department of Health and Human Services facility sheltering children who entered the U.S. illegally. It's the first look inside one of these shelters since the Trump administration instituted a zero-tolerance immigration policy in April that resulted in the separation of children from parents who illegally cross the border with them. The facility is a former Walmart in Brownsville, Texas, not far from the Mexican border.